When I think back to those cold, fluorescent-lit classrooms of Brookdale High, I remember two things vividly: the sound of my pencil scratching hopelessly across blank worksheets, and the voice of Mrs. Langston echoing in my head, sharper than any winter wind. "Emily, maybe you should lower your expectations," she said one afternoon in front of the entire class. "Not everyone is meant for success." She was my 10th grade business studies teacher. The irony. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 now, CEO of a mid-sized tech firm in Austin, Texas, with over 70 employees and a global client base. But back then, I was just a girl from a broken home, with frizzy brown hair, a second-hand backpack, and a dream I kept folded in my journal because I was too afraid to speak it aloud. Brookdale High was nestled in a middle-income suburb outside Chicago. A place where dreams went to die quietly behind vending machines and bathroom graffiti. My mother worked double shifts as a nurse, and my father, well, I didn't know where he was. Probably trying to forget we ever existed. I remember the hallway tiles, always stained. The lockers with chipped paint. And the way people looked at me like I was invisible unless I gave them a reason to laugh. I was smart, but I wasn't the kind of smart that fit neatly into Scantron bubbles or please standardized testing benchmarks. I liked building things. Sketching app layouts in my notebook. Studying marketing trends from outdated library books. But none of that mattered to Mrs. Langston. She taught by the textbook. If you didn't raise your hand at the right moment or memorize her rigid definitions, you were lazy, undisciplined, a waste of time. One day, after a pop quiz I barely passed, she pulled me aside. "Emily, some people are just average. And that's okay. Maybe don't set yourself up for disappointment with all this entrepreneur talk." She said it with a smile, a smug, tight-lipped expression that drained the blood from my face. It wasn't the words that haunted me. It was the way she said it, like a final verdict, like she'd just sealed my fate with a red pen. That evening, I sat alone in my room, lit by the glow of my second-hand Dell laptop. The Wi-Fi cut in and out, but I found this online course on basic coding. I didn't understand much at first, but something inside me snapped, quietly, like the first crack in ice before the thaw. I started waking up early, sneaking in lessons before school, staying up until midnight to practice building basic sites. No one knew. Not my friends, not my mom, and certainly not Mrs. Langston. Still, the feeling of being less than clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't shake it. Every time I submitted a class assignment, I heard her voice. Every time I fumbled a group project, it rang louder. "You'll never succeed. You're not built for this." By junior year, I had designed my first app prototype. Nothing fancy, just a virtual planner with customizable visuals, but it worked. I showed it to my guidance counselor, Mr. Bryant, hoping for encouragement. He blinked at the screen, then chuckled. "This is cute, Emily. But maybe focus on graduation first, huh?" I smiled politely, but inside, I was drowning. I had no allies in that school. No mentors. Just doubt, debt, and this absurd fire inside me that refused to go out. The first time I made money from my code was during senior year. A local bakery wanted a basic website. I charged $150. When they paid me in cash, I held it in my palm for a long time. Not because it was a lot, but because it was proof. Proof that I wasn't nothing. That someone saw value in what I could create. That moment should have been joyous, but instead, it made me ache. I realized no one had ever expected me to win, not the school, not the system, not even the people paid to believe in me. Especially not Mrs. Langston. Graduation came and went. I didn't win awards. No one called my name with pride. I walked across that stage with a blank face and a clenched jaw. But inside, I whispered a promise. "I'll build something so big, you won't be able to ignore me." College wasn't an option. Not with my financial situation. So I went straight into freelancing. I picked up gigs online, websites, branding, UI/UX designs. I took calls from the bathroom at my part-time retail job. I taught myself everything through free resources, boot camps, and YouTube tutorials. By 23, I'd built a small freelance network and incorporated my own company, Carter Code. My team? Just me and one friend from Reddit who lived in Portland. But we grew. Slowly. Month by month. Failure by failure. Until one day, I wasn't scared anymore. Then last month, something happened. I was at a conference in Dallas, speaking on a panel about minority women in tech. After my talk, I was approached by someone I hadn't seen in over a decade. She wore a navy pantsuit, carried a resume folder. Her hair had grayed, but the voice? Unmistakable. "Emily Carter?" she asked, extending her hand. It was Mrs. Langston. Everything slowed down. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, I was 16 again. Awkward, terrified, unheard. But now I stood taller. Wore a blazer with my company's logo. Had a team of 70. A full PR schedule. A corner office and capital investors. I wasn't that invisible girl anymore. "Mrs. Langston," I said, shaking her hand. "Didn't expect to see you here." Her smile faltered. Just a flicker. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I heard about Carter Code. You've done well. Actually, I was wondering if you might be hiring." And just like that, the room vanished. My heart thundered in my ears. The woman who told me I'd never succeed was now asking me for a job. The air smelled sterile, like hotel carpet and espresso. But in that moment, all I could smell was the past, chalk dust, cafeteria food, and failure. Only this time, it didn't belong to me. I thought I had buried that part of my past, the classroom, the smirks, the red ink bleeding across my assignments. But life has a funny way of stirring old wounds, especially when you least expect it. It started with a single email. I was sitting in my corner office, sipping lukewarm espresso, the morning sun painting gold across the glass walls of my downtown headquarters. My assistant had just forwarded a request for a guest speaker. Apparently, an inner-city school was looking for successful entrepreneurs to inspire their graduating seniors. Harmless enough, until I saw the name at the bottom of the invitation. Request submitted by Ms. Carol Jenkins. I stared at the screen like it had betrayed me. Jenkins. Her. The teacher who once looked me dead in the eye and said I was a good example of what happens when potential goes to waste. The woman who made high school a slow-burning humiliation for 4 years straight. The same one who called me lazy, unfocused, and once told my parents during a meeting that I'd be lucky if I didn't end up working minimum wage. Now she was reaching out. Now she wanted me, her failure, to inspire her students. I leaned back in my chair, confused, suspicious. Did she not recognize my name? Was it possible she didn't connect the dots? Or had she known exactly who she was writing to? The questions wouldn't stop. Over the next few days, I couldn't get it out of my head. I kept rereading the email. It wasn't generic. It had a personal tone. "We'd be honored to have someone with your inspiring journey speak to our seniors." Inspiring journey? The same woman who once called my final project a scattered mess and handed it back with AD? I tried brushing it off. Maybe she had changed. Maybe she was just desperate to book someone impressive, and I'd made the news enough to be on her radar. But the unease grew heavier. I found myself scrolling through old class photos, reliving those moments I thought I'd moved past. The one time she pulled me aside in front of the whole class and said, "You're just not leadership material." The parent-teacher conference where she told my mom, "He doesn't apply himself, he probably never will." My success didn't erase those scars. It only made them louder. And the more I thought about it, the more it fell off. Why me? Why now? I asked my assistant to look deeper into the event. She came back 2 hours later. "You're not going to believe this," she said, dropping a folder on my desk. "Ms. Jenkins isn't just any teacher at the school. She's the principal now." I blinked. She got promoted? 10 years ago. And apparently, the school's struggling. Budget cuts, declining enrollment, poor test scores. This guest speaker program? It's part of a new initiative to turn the school around and attract funding. I didn't say anything. My fingers traced the edge of the folder. "Oh," she added. "And get this, she specifically requested you. Not your company. You by name." That was it. The subtle disturbance became a pattern. Now, it was undeniable. I started to notice more. She began liking my company's posts on LinkedIn, shared one of our articles. I even got a notification that she'd viewed my profile. She was watching me carefully, strategically. Still, I kept telling myself, maybe it's just professional. Maybe this is her way of making peace. Then the phone call came. It was after hours. My office was quiet, the city humming softly outside my windows. I don't usually answer unknown numbers, but something told me to pick up. Hello. A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. Clipped, formal. Mr. Ramirez? This is Carol Jenkins. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Her voice hadn't changed. Still sharp, still calculated. Still the same tone she used to use when she called on me, fully expecting me not to have the answer. I received your assistant's message, she continued, about reviewing the invitation. I just wanted to follow up personally. We'd really love to have you speak. I kept my voice neutral. You're the principal now? Yes, she said. 10 years this March. I didn't know you remembered me. A beat. I do, she replied. Quite well, in fact. You were a unique student. Unique. That was code. I knew what she meant. I've followed your success, she added. You've done very well for yourself. Your story would mean a lot to our students. I didn't know what was more unsettling, the fact that she remembered me in such detail, or the fact that she was suddenly so polite. I'll think about it, I said, then hung up. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Every carefully chosen word, every fake smile I imagined behind her voice. And I couldn't shake the thought, was this redemption, or was it manipulation? The next day, I did what I hadn't done in years. I drove back to my old neighborhood, past the cracked sidewalks, the shuttered corner store, the field where we used to play soccer until the streetlights blinked on. The school looked smaller than I remembered, older, worn out, like the past refusing to let go. I parked across the street and just sat there, watching students pour out, backpacks slung low, phones in hand, some laughing, some silent. For a moment, I could see myself there. The kid no one believed in. The boy Jenkins rode off. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a confrontation with everything I used to be. That night, I stared at my laptop screen for hours. The speaking invitation sat there, waiting. I hovered over the reply button, unsure of what I'd say. But deep down, a part of me already knew. This wasn't about a school event. This was about power, about control, about the teacher who told me I'd never succeed now crawling back in a polished email, needing me. And the worst part? I didn't know if I wanted revenge or validation. I didn't know which one would satisfy me more. So, I typed a single sentence, then paused. Right before I hit send, another notification popped up. A new email. From Jenkins. Subject line, urgent follow-up, can we talk privately? And just like that, the suspense shifted into something darker. Something deeper. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I don't know what made me do it, but that day, after the last client meeting of the week, I pulled up my old high school's website. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I just wanted to remind myself how far I'd come. My assistant had just confirmed our partnership deal with one of the biggest firms in the country, and instead of celebrating, I sat in my office with a strange hollowness in my chest. That school, that room, her voice. It all came rushing back. I clicked through the staff directory, wondering if any of the teachers I'd once known were still around. There she was, Mrs. Kendall, head of the English department. Still there. Still smiling in her little staff photo, like she hadn't once stood in front of a classroom and told a 14-year-old boy that his ideas were unrealistic and that kids like you don't make it. I don't think I ever truly processed the way her words had burned into me until that moment. The woman who had once told me I lacked focus, that I should be more realistic and try to find a trade, was still shaping young minds. My hand trembled slightly on the mouse. I zoomed in on her photo and stared. The walls of my office suddenly felt too clean, too modern, too detached from the memory I had just unearthed. That weekend, I took a detour. The school was holding its annual career day. My old friend Darren, who now taught there, had casually invited me months ago. I hadn't responded. But now I was going. Not for glory. Not for revenge. Just to see. As I walked through the front gate, a strange blend of nostalgia and nausea hit me. The corridors were the same peeling green lockers, same scuffed beige floors. I could almost hear the sound of bells and sneakers echoing down the hallway. "Mr. Malik," a voice called. A young teacher, clipboard in hand, greeted me at the entrance. "Thank you for volunteering today. You're scheduled for room 3C, second floor." Room 3C. My old classroom. Of course. I made my way upstairs, each step slower than the last. When I entered the room, students were still filing in. I sat up near the whiteboard, clicking open my presentation slides. I was early. Then I heard it. That voice. Clear. Crisp. Unmistakable. "Let's not waste time today, everyone. We have guests with real-world experience. Please give your attention." She stepped into the room. Her eyes landed on me. For a second, just 1 second, she didn't recognize me. But then it hit her. Her expression faltered, lips parting just slightly before she caught herself. "Mr. Malik," she said, her tone tighter now. "A pleasure." I nodded. "It's been a while." The students seemed intrigued. One of them raised a hand. "Wait, you two know each other?" Mrs. Kendall smiled thinly. "Mr. Malik was once a student here. Many years ago." I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. Then I launched into my presentation. I told them about my company, the risks I'd taken, the failures I'd learned from. I told them how I started with nothing but a laptop, a ridiculous amount of debt, and an idea no one believed in. Not even my teachers. Especially not her. I didn't name her, of course. I wasn't there to humiliate. I wanted those kids to hear the truth, but not a revenge tale. A resurrection one. Still, I saw her shifting in her seat at the back of the class, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Every word was a reminder that she had misjudged someone who'd once just wanted a chance. Afterward, as the students shuffled out for their next session, one of them whispered, "That was incredible." And then it was just me and her. She approached slowly, adjusting her lanyard. "You've done well. I'm impressed." I turned toward the whiteboard, erasing my name with one smooth motion. "Thanks." Though I wasn't always made to feel like I could. Her voice softened just a bit. "You were a dreamer back then. It's hard to tell which kids will make it. I'm sorry if I ever discouraged you." If. That word hung between us. "You didn't just discourage me," I said, eyes locked on hers. "You made me feel like I didn't belong in rooms like this. Like I wasn't capable." I carried that for years. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The apology never came. Not fully. Not in the way I needed. But maybe it didn't matter anymore. Because I had made it anyway. And she knew it. Later that day, as I stood outside the school gates, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Darren. "Dude, Kendall just asked me if there were any job openings at your company. Said she's thinking of leaving the school soon." I stared at the message for a long time, my mind trying to wrap around the irony. The woman who once told me I'd never make it was now considering applying to work under me. That moment didn't fill me with glee. No smugness. Just silence. And then a quiet realization. Sometimes, the sweetest success isn't in proving them wrong. It's in knowing you didn't need their belief to begin with. But that wasn't the end. Not quite. Because the next morning, my assistant forwarded me an email. Subject, employment inquiry. From Kendall M. at oldhyde.edu. My chest tightened. I clicked it open. I hadn't planned on running into her. Honestly, I wasn't even thinking about her when I walked into the school that day. I had been invited as the keynote speaker for an entrepreneurship seminar for the graduating class. The school reached out after seeing an interview I'd done in a local business magazine. The Boy Who Built an Empire, they called it. I smiled when I first read that headline. Not because I was proud of the empire, but because I remembered being told I wouldn't even be capable of building a life. She had told me that. Mrs. Langston, 11th grade economics teacher. The woman who looked me dead in the eyes one day and said, You don't have what it takes. Some people just don't. Back then, I said nothing. I carried that sentence like a curse, letting it seep into my skin and fuel the fire inside me for years. So, when I walked into the familiar old auditorium, now dressed in tailored charcoal, a watch ticking on my wrist worth more than the desk I used to sit at, I didn't expect my past to walk out from the shadows of the hallway. But it did. She was still there. Same square glasses. Same sharp bun. Same disapproving eyes that scanned me up and down when we crossed paths just outside the staff lounge. There was a second of pause. Then her voice, dry and metallic, like the radiator that never worked in her classroom, cut through the hallway. Oh. I didn't realize they let former students give speeches now. I blinked. Not out of surprise, but out of restraint. She didn't recognize me, at least not yet. I stepped closer, smiling politely. I'm the founder of Vertex Digital. The school invited me to speak today. You might remember me. Jacob Hill. Her face went pale like someone had opened a window in winter. Her eyes widened ever so slightly, and then she composed herself. Oh, Jacob, she said flatly. Yes, of course. You were in my third period. 11th grade economics, I replied. You once told me I'd never succeed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sneer. I just said it plainly, like reading an old receipt. She shifted her weight, trying to regain control. Well, I wouldn't take that so literally, she said. Teachers have to be honest sometimes. It's not personal. It was personal to me, I replied. I carried it for years. For a moment, the hallway was dead silent. Jacob, she said, tone softening with an edge of apology. Sometimes tough words push students to work harder. Clearly, you made something of yourself. I narrowed my gaze, heart thumping with the weight of everything she never saw in me. You didn't push me. You dismissed me. That's not fair. You told a 17-year-old he didn't have potential. You didn't guide me, challenge me, or help me. You wrote me off. Her lips parted slightly, but she couldn't argue. The truth sat heavy between us. You weren't the only one, by the way, I added, voice steady. But you were the first, and that made all the difference. She nodded slowly, forced to accept the reflection of her own judgment. But just as I turned to walk away, she asked something unexpected. What made you succeed then, Jacob? I turned back. And for the first time in my life, I looked her straight in the eye with no fear, no doubt, and no hunger for approval, believing that I could, even when no one else did. She stood frozen as I walked away. But it wasn't over yet. Later that day, after my talk, where I shared my story with a gymnasium full of students hanging on every word, I was approached by the school's business coordinator. You're not going to believe this, she said with a smirk. Mrs. Langston just applied to a part-time digital training role we're offering through your company's education platform. I blinked. Thought it was a joke. She applied to work under Vertex? Yep. Your team will be reviewing applications next week. Small world, huh? I laughed. Quiet, low, almost in disbelief. I had gone from the boy who sat quietly in the back row, afraid to raise his hand, to the man writing the very checks her future now depended on. And somehow, in that moment, I didn't feel vengeful. I felt free, but not naive, because sometimes life writes better poetry than we ever could. And mine had just written the perfect stanza. Still, I hadn't decided yet whether to approve her application or not. Part of me wanted to be generous. Part of me wanted to make her wait. We'll see how the interview goes, I told my assistant. And as I walked out of the building, leaving the ghosts of my teenage shame behind, the only sound I heard was the quiet echo of a door, finally, closing behind me. The meeting room was silent except for the subtle hum of the ceiling fan and the gentle tapping of my pen on the glass table. Across from me sat Mr. Denton, my former high school English teacher, the man who once laughed when I told him I wanted to run my own business. His presence in my office felt surreal. His suit was slightly too large, like he'd borrowed it, and his once commanding voice now trembled slightly when he spoke. He was clearly nervous. He had applied for a consulting role we'd advertised, never imagining he'd walk into a room and find me, his former failure of a student, sitting at the head of the table. He didn't recognize me at first. Or maybe he pretended not to. But when I introduced myself, his face froze, like a frame paused on a movie where everything starts to unravel. "Wait, you were in my 10th grade class," he had said. "Yes," I replied calmly. "The one you told wouldn't make it past a cashier job." His face flushed with an awkward shade of red. That was 2 days ago. Now I was sitting at home, sipping coffee and replaying the interaction in my mind. I couldn't tell if I felt satisfied or hollow. I thought I would feel triumphant, that I would stand tall and reclaim my dignity. But what I felt instead was something heavier, something more complicated. After years of being told I wasn't smart enough, creative enough, worth enough, I had built a company from nothing. I'd poured sleepless nights into product development, scraped savings to get my first prototype out, pitched to 100 uninterested investors before one finally said yes. My team now numbered over 70, and our product, a streamlined inventory automation system, was being adopted in mid-sized retail chains across the country. I had partnerships, media mentions, and enough money to not worry about money. But none of that erased the moments I sat alone in school restrooms, replaying his words. "You talk big, but you don't have what it takes." And yet now he needed a job. From me. When I walked into my office this morning, my assistant had already placed the finalized list of candidates on my desk. Mr. Denton's name was there, circled in red. He'd made the final shortlist. That meant HR had found his skill set adequate. That meant I had to make a decision. I stared at his resume. Clean. Overqualified in some areas. He'd gone through some rough years, clearly. 2 layoffs. 1 failed startup of his own. And now, reaching out in desperation to a company run by someone he once belittled. I sat back and closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to reject him. Just say no. Not even offer an explanation. Let him wonder. Let him feel that sting of rejection that he had so casually dealt to others. Let him taste the void he once pushed me into. But another part of me, the part that remembered how much I wanted just one person to believe in me, hesitated. I thought back to that day in school. He had caught me drawing logos in my notebook and asked what they were. I told him they were ideas for a business I wanted to start one day. He laughed. He laughed in front of the entire class. "Let's get you to pass basic algebra first, all right?" He'd said, his words slicing through whatever fragile dream I had been trying to form. That moment stayed with me for years. Every time I wanted to give up, I'd hear his voice, smug, amused, disbelieving. And I'd push harder just to prove it wrong. I used his doubt like fuel. But now, with the fire still burning, I wondered if it had consumed too much. Later that day, I called my mother. She'd always supported me, even when others didn't. "Mom," I said, "do you remember Mr. Denton?" There was a pause on the line. "That teacher who said you had delusions of grandeur?" How could I forget? He applied for a job at my company. I could hear the silence grow heavier, then her quiet breath. "And I'm trying to decide what to do." "What does your heart say?" she asked. I hated that question, because my heart said too many things. Part of it said justice. Another part said compassion. And the deepest part whispered something else entirely. Closure. The next morning, I asked to meet Mr. Denton privately. When he entered my office, he looked more composed this time, but still carried the air of a man unsure of his place. I gestured to the chair across from me. "I wanted to speak to you directly," I said, "before I make a decision." He nodded, nervously folding his hands in his lap. "I've read your application. You're clearly qualified. But I need to ask, why here? Why me?" He took a slow breath. "I didn't know this company was yours until I saw your name. And by then, I needed this job too much to back out." I said nothing. Let the silence work. "I want to say something to you," he continued, voice shaking. "I was wrong. About you. About your potential. You didn't deserve the way I spoke to you back then. I don't know what I thought I was doing, maybe trying to toughen you up, or maybe I just didn't see your light. But it was there. And I see it now. His voice broke slightly. I'm sorry. I didn't expect the apology.
Not like that.
For a second, I was the teenager again, raw, rejected, aching for validation. But then I was the adult I had become. Grounded. Successful.
Free.
I leaned forward and said, Mr. Denton, I built this company despite what you said. But I'd be lying if I said your words didn't shape me. Every time I was tempted to quit, I heard your voice in my head. And every time, I pushed harder. He nodded slowly, guilt etched in every wrinkle of his face. I'm hiring you, I said. He looked up, eyes widening in disbelief. But not because I've forgotten. I'm hiring you because I remember. And because I believe everyone deserves a second chance, including the kid you gave up on. That night, I sat on my balcony, looking out over the skyline of the city I had once dreamed of conquering. I didn't feel rage, or even triumph. I felt powerfully at peace. My journey was no longer about proving people wrong. It was about proving myself right. And that shift, that subtle but massive shift, was what truly made me free. A week later, I saw Mr. Denton in the hallway, walking with one of our junior developers, his voice no longer condescending, but gentle and instructive. He paused when he saw me and gave a respectful nod. Later, I found a note in my inbox. Thank you for giving me the chance I never gave you, Denton. And in that moment, I realized true success isn't revenge. It's becoming the kind of person they told you you could never be.